My doctor says that at my age, early rising is a physiological inevitability, not a sign of discipline. Every morning I wake up at 5:30, as if there were a timer inside me that couldn't be turned off. 78 years of experience have taught me that arguing with my own body is futile. I'm Bradford Innes, and my world has shrunk to the size of this two-story house on the outskirts of Atlanta. A house I've lived in for almost 50 years and where every crack in the wall has a story to tell. Margaret always wanted to move to something more modern, but I was against it. My roots had grown through that foundation, and to uproot them would mean losing a part of myself. Margaret. It's been 10 years since she passed away. Pancreatic cancer is ruthless and fast, only 3 months between diagnosis and funeral. Not enough time to realize what was happening, but enough to see life leave a loved one day by day. After 48 years of marriage, loneliness feels like an amputation. You seem to be all there, but you constantly feel the phantom pain of a missing part of yourself. I've never been a person prone to excessive sentimentality. 35 years as a building inspector had taught me to look at life through the lens of pragmatism. But without Margaret, even the most mundane things lost their functionality. Our daughter Loralee visited me every day for the first few weeks after the funeral, then once a week, then on special occasions. Now I see her maybe once a month if I'm lucky. She says she's busy at work. She's a human resources specialist for some technology company. Ironically, I've never been a resource to her, except financially. I look at my watch. 7 a.m. I pour myself a cup of coffee and walk out onto the back porch. The July sun is starting to set, but the morning chill still lingers in the shade of the old oak tree. It's the oak I planted when Loralee was 5 years old. Now it towers over the house. Sturdy, dependable, not like the relationship with its namesake. Loralee was always a mommy's girl. I worked 6 days a week, often late. The construction boom of the 80s and 90s meant there was a lot of work to do. Someone had to make sure the houses didn't fall apart a year after they were built. I was proud of my job, of my reputation as an unyielding but fair inspector. My signature on documents was a guarantee of quality, but that reputation came with a price. I missed Loralee's first high school play, her prom, many birthdays. I provided for my family, gave them everything money could buy. But time was the one resource I couldn't use freely. When Loralee was 19, she announced that she was marrying Mervyn Wills, a skinny guy with running eyes and an accounting degree. I was against it. Too young, too inexperienced. But Margaret supported them, and I relented. For the first time, but not the last. The wedding was modest, but I paid the bills, as did their first apartment, as did college for their daughter, my granddaughter Enid, and a lot of other things. Enid, the one ray of light in this story. 25 years old, sharp mind and honest heart. She works for some IT company doing something to do with data security. I don't always understand what she's talking about, but I love hearing her enthusiastic voice. She's the only one who calls me for nothing, no reason or request. My phone vibrates in my robe pocket. Speak of the devil, it's Enid. Grandpa, are you awake already? At my age, sleeping in before dinner is an unacceptable luxury, I reply with a smile that she can't see, but I'm sure she can hear in my voice. How's your lower back? Did you see Dr. Chang? I did. He said the same thing he always says. Old age has no cure. Enid laughs, and that sound reminds me of Margaret. The same iridescent timbre, the same sincerity. Listen, I was wondering, could you help me with my tax return? I'm confused about these deductions, and my dad's too busy right now. Oh, here it is. Mervyn, the family's financial genius, is too busy to help his own daughter. Old man Bradford, on the other hand, always has time, and money if he needs it. Sure, baby. Come by on Saturday, we'll sort it out. After I talk to Enid, I'm in a better mood. I take a shower, get dressed, and decide to drive to the supermarket. My old Buick, which is almost as old as Loralee and Mervyn's marriage, Starts on the third try. A faithful old friend. On the way, I pass the new Riverside Heights neighborhood. There, in one of those shiny two-story houses with manicured lawns, Lauralee and Mervyn live, in a house that was largely paid for by me. It happened 6 months ago. Lauralee called me in the evening, voice excited. "Dad, we found the perfect house. It's exactly what we've always dreamed of. But we're a little short on the down payment." A little turned out to be $175,000, almost half the cost of the house. I could afford it. Years of savings, good investments, and retirement had given me a financial cushion. But it wasn't about the money. "What about your current house?" I asked then. "Oh, Dad, it's so outdated, and the neighborhood isn't the same. Riverside has better schools, closer parks." "Enid's not in high school anymore, Lauralee. It's not just that. Mervyn will be closer to work, and besides, we deserve a better place to live." Deserve. It's a word I've always resisted. I used to believe that nothing in life was given for nothing. Everything had to be earned. But Lauralee, my only daughter, I agreed. I signed the check, helped with the paperwork, even took care of the insurance and some of the utilities. All in all, it turned out to be 135 monthly bills that were automatically deducted from my account. Margaret would have called it crazy, but she'd always been the more practical of the two of us. I, on the other hand, despite my outward sternness, had proven to be soft when it came to Lauralee. I hoped this gesture would bring us closer together, that Lauralee would see how much I cared for her, even if I couldn't put it into words, that Mervyn would finally stop looking at me as an inconvenient obligation, an old man who had to be tolerated because of family ties. They invited me to a housewarming party, a formal dinner with their friends and co-workers. I felt uncomfortable among these people with their talk of stock quotes and fancy restaurants. Mervyn introduced me as Lauralee's father, with no mention of my contribution to their new home. And when I tried to talk about my work at the building inspectorate, he interrupted me with an anecdote about bureaucrats stuck in the last century. After that evening, our relationship didn't improve, but rather became even more strained. Lauralee only called when there was a problem with the house, a leaky faucet, a strange noise in the air conditioning system. I'd come, fix it, leave. Sometimes they'd take me out to lunch, hastily prepared with the distinct feeling that I was taking up their precious time. And Mervyn always held himself aloof, polite on the surface but with barely concealed irritation. I often caught his glances, assessing, calculating, as if he was calculating how much more he could squeeze out of the old man before he went to the grave. At the supermarket, I meet Horace Jenkins, my former colleague. We stand at the canned food shelf and discuss price increases, the new highway interchange, and prostate problems, the usual topics for two older men. "How's yours?" Horace asks. "Daughter, son-in-law, granddaughter?" "Fine," I answer. Lauralee works in HR. Mervyn is still in his accounting office. Enid's in IT, doing something with computers. "Do you see each other often?" I shrug. "On holidays. Sometimes on weekends." Horace nods understandingly. He has kids too, and his relationship with them isn't much better than mine. "My Jenny only calls when she needs money," he says with a bitter chuckle. "Last month she asked for a new car. I told her the old one was still good enough. She took offense, hasn't called in 3 weeks. We laugh, but there is no joy in that laughter. Only a shared understanding of the bitterness you feel when your children see you as an ATM machine instead of a human being. Back home, I see a message on my answering machine. It's Lauralee, her voice sounding annoyed. "Dad, you promised to transfer the money to the gardener's account by the 15th, and today is the 17th. He's been calling, asking when the payment is due. Please deal with it today. I don't remember promising to pay the gardener as well." But arguing with Lorelei is like trying to stem the tide with your bare hands. It's easier to pay. I sit down at my computer, one of the few modern acquisitions Enid insisted on so we could video chat. I open the banking site, enter my credit card information. The amount isn't that big, but it's a matter of principle. When did it happen that I became just a funding source for them? I wire the money, but I don't call Laurel to let her know. I let the gardener tell her when he gets paid. In the evening, Enid arrives. No warning. Just shows up on my doorstep with a bag from the Chinese restaurant and a bottle of my favorite bourbon. "Thought I'd brighten your Friday night, Grandpa," she says, kissing me on the cheek. We sit on the back porch, eating noodles straight out of cardboard boxes and watching the sun set behind the tree line. Enid talks about her job, her co-workers, a new project that might bring her a promotion. "And how are your parents?" I ask when the conversation naturally comes to this topic. Enid tenses up a little. "Normal. Dad's at work all the time. Mom is busy fixing up the house, ordering new furniture." "Do they like the new place?" "Very much," she pauses. "Grandpa, thank you for your help with the house. I know you gave them a lot of money." "It's family," I say, shrugging my shoulders. "What else is money for at my age?" Enid looks at me with a long, studying stare. "You know, sometimes I think they take your help for granted." I don't answer. What can I say? She's right, and we both know it. "You deserve more respect," she continues. "You've done so much for them." "For us," I correct her. "For all of you." She nods, but I can see the disagreement in her eyes. Enid has always been an observant girl. She sees what's going on in our family more clearly than I'd like. When she leaves, I sit on the porch for a long time, sipping bourbon and pondering how we got to this life. Where and when did I go wrong? Maybe I should have spent more time with Loralee as a child, less work, more being around her. Or was it Mervyn, his influence on my daughter? Or maybe I was just an inconvenient reminder of the past, of the times when they didn't have their own house in an upscale neighborhood, new cars and designer furniture. A reminder that all this came about not because of their own efforts, but because of an old man who loved his daughter too much and realized too late that money can't buy love. Stars appear in the sky one by one. Somewhere out there among them, Margaret looks up at me and shakes her head. "I told you, Brad. I warned you." She's always seen right through Mervyn. "There's no backbone in him," she said. "He'll use Loralee and she'll let him. I finish my bourbon and go inside. Enid's coming tomorrow and we're going to do her tax return. At least I have a normal relationship with her. At least she sees me as more than just a checkbook. And Loralee and Mervyn, well, I'm still hoping that one day they'll realize that a house isn't the walls and roof but the people who live in it, and that some things money can't buy no matter how much of it." Enid arrived at exactly 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Punctuality is a trait she inherited not from her parents but from me. Loralee was always late, even for her own wedding. And Mervyn, well, time was always a stretch with Mervyn, especially when it came to family obligations. "Got all the papers, grandfather." Enid waved the folder as she entered the house. "And I bought those cinnamon buns you like." We settled down at the kitchen table, spreading out the papers. Enid was really confused about tax deductions. Her job involved freelancing, and that's always a headache for tax returns. We immersed ourselves in the work, and for a while I felt useful, needed. It's a nice feeling when your experience and expertise is actually needed by someone. An hour later, we finished the paperwork, and Enid made tea. While she was fiddling with the cups, I noticed that she was unusually agitated, shifting from foot to foot, tapping her spoon on the tabletop, avoiding my gaze. "Is something wrong?" I asked her bluntly. I'd never been a master of small talk and preferred to get straight to the point. Enid set the cup down in front of me and sat down across from me. "It's nothing bad," she smiled, but it was tentative. "It's just, Dad got a promotion at work. He's been promoted to CFO of the entire division." I nodded. Mervyn was always looking to advance his career, and I knew he'd been aiming for that position for a long time. "That's good news. Tell him congratulations." Yeah, it's really great. Enid paused. They're having a dinner for it next Friday. A family celebration. Mom's making her signature roast. I waited for her to continue, guessing where she was going with this. I was thinking, I mean, I think you should come too. Enid looked at me hopefully. I'm sure they just forgot to invite you. Oh, that's it. I wasn't invited to the family reunion. It was a typical situation, but for some reason, it stung now. If they didn't invite me, then they don't want me there, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Grandpa, you know Mom. She's always in her own thoughts, forgetting the important things. And Dad, well, he never organizes these things. I could see Enid was trying to smooth things over, but we both knew the truth. I wasn't invited, not out of forgetfulness, but on purpose. In any case, I'll tell them you're coming too. Enid smiled with feigned nonchalance. 7 o'clock next Friday night. It will be just us, no co-workers or outsiders. I looked at my granddaughter, the only person in this family who really considered my feelings and decided not to argue. For her sake, I was willing to swallow this bitter pill. All right, I said at last. I'll be there. Can I help you with anything? Maybe buy some wine or dessert? Enid brightened up. No, you don't need anything. Just come. It'll be great. After she left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time thinking about the situation. Mervin's promotion was certainly an important event for their family. The new position meant more money, more prestige. Perhaps now they would be able to pay the mortgage on their own, without my help. The thought brought up mixed feelings. On the one hand, it would be wonderful if they became financially independent. On the other hand, I realized that my financial support was one of the few threads that bound us together. If that thread was severed, would there be anything left? On Monday, I decided to buy a gift for Mervin. Despite our strained relationship, a promotion at work was a significant event and deserved to be recognized. I went to the mall, feeling a little uncomfortable among the brightly colored window displays and noisy visitors. What do you give on such occasions? Something practical or symbolic. I wandered from store to store, looking at cufflinks, too personal, diaries, too mundane, whiskey. Mervin preferred wine. Finally, I settled on an expensive fountain pen, a classic gift for a man who had been promoted. The saleswoman spent a long time wrapping the pen in a gift box, tying it with a ribbon. For your son? She asked with a smile. For my son-in-law, I replied. That's nice. He'll be so happy. I didn't dissuade her. Why ruin her idea of a happy family where father-in-law and son-in-law are best friends? At home, I put the box on the mantelpiece so I wouldn't forget to pick it up on Friday. The whole week went by with a strange anticipation. I even bought a new shirt, dark blue, with a small pattern. Margaret always said that color suited me. Thursday night, I was checking my email, a habit I'd acquired thanks to Enid. Grandpa, this way we can communicate more often, she used to say when setting up my account for me a few years ago. Among the usual spam and mailings was a message from Lauralee. My heart squeezed for a moment. Maybe she had decided to officially invite me after all. I opened the email and read, Dad, Enid said she invited you to our family dinner on Friday. I should apologize, but I'm afraid that's not possible. We had planned a small gathering for only the closest of people, and Mervin is very nervous about this evening. He doesn't want people outside of our immediate family to attend. Please understand and don't be offended. We'll be sure to have a communal dinner another time. I reread the message several times, not believing my eyes. People outside of our immediate family. I, her father, the man who raised her, educated her, helped her buy a house, was outside the family. And then there's that wording, Mervin doesn't want to. Not we decided, but Mervin doesn't want to. A cold rage rose in my chest. I didn't get angry often, preferring restraint to emotional outbursts, but now I was truly angry. Not so much by the rejection, but by the wording. It was as if I was some kind of outsider, an unwelcome guest rather than a family member. I was about to answer the letter to say what I'd been saying for years. But then I imagined Lorelei showing my message to Mervyn, and the two of them discussing the old man who thinks too much of himself. No, I would not give them that pleasure. Instead, I wrote a short reply. I understand. Give Mervyn my congratulations on his promotion. No apology, no explanation, no emotion, just a statement of fact. After sending the message, I picked up the box and pen and put it away in my desk drawer. Perhaps someday I would find another use for it or another recipient. I spent the rest of the evening going through old photo albums. Here's Lorelei at age 5, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. Here she is at her high school prom, so pretty in her blue dress. Here's her wedding to Mervyn, me walking her down the aisle, a frozen smile on my face masking doubt. Here are Enid's first days in this world, a tiny bundle in the hands of proud parents. When did it all go wrong? At what point did I stop being a father and become just an ATM machine? Or was it always that way, I just didn't want to notice it? Friday morning, Enid called. Her voice sounded guilty. Grandpa, Mom said she wrote to you about dinner. Yes, she explained the situation, I interrupted, not wanting Enid to feel uncomfortable. It's okay. Your father has a big day and he wants to spend it the way he sees fit. It's not his decision, Enid exclaimed with sudden fervor. I mean, yes, he said he'd feel uncomfortable if you came, but Mom could have insisted. I remained silent, letting Enid speak. I tried to explain to them that it wasn't fair, that you were part of the family, that without your help they wouldn't even have this house where they had their precious dinner. Enid, I stopped her gently. You don't have to fight with your parents over me. But it's not right. I could hear tears in her voice. They're using you, grandfather, taking advantage of your kindness, your money, and then pushing you away when you make them uncomfortable. Her words were painfully accurate, but I didn't want her caught between two fires. Listen, baby, I've lived a long life and I've learned one important thing. You can't force people to like you or respect you. They either do or they don't. And no amount of money or gifts is going to change that. But they should. Should is a dangerous word, I said. There were a lot of things I should have done differently too. Spending more time with your mom as a kid, working less, talking more. Maybe things would have worked out differently then. Enid sighed. I still think it's unfair. Life is rarely fair, baby. But don't worry about me. I'm fine. I have my classes, my friends. It was a lie. I had hardly any friends left, most of them dead or moved closer to their children. But Enid didn't need to know that. Come to my place on Saturday, I suggested, changing the subject. I'll make my special lasagna, and we'll watch a movie together. I will, she agreed at once. I'll bring the wine. After talking to Enid, I sat on the back porch for a long time looking at my garden. The apple trees I'd planted 20 years ago were now full of fruit. A few more weeks and they would be ready to pick. I used to make cider from these apples. Margaret loved their tart flavor. In recent years, I've just given the apples away to neighbors or let them fall and rot on the ground. What was the point of making cider for one person? In the house across the street lived a young family, the Thompsons. Sometimes their children would climb over the fence to pick apples. I pretended not to notice. Let them enjoy it while they could. Childhood passes too quickly. In the evening, knowing that Lorelei and Mervyn were now enjoying their family dinner, I made myself a simple supper of scrambled eggs and bacon and toast. Margaret had always rebuked me for my love of such food. Cholesterol, Brad, think of your heart. But at 78, cholesterol was the least of my problems. I turned on the TV, but I couldn't concentrate on the program. My thoughts kept returning to Lorelei's letter, to the phrase, people outside our immediate family. As if all these years, all these sacrifices, all this financial support meant nothing. Maybe it did. Perhaps I had created this situation myself by letting them get used to the idea that my money was a given, something to take for granted. Perhaps if I had been more demanding, less generous, they would have appreciated what they had more. Or maybe it wasn't about the money at all. Maybe Mervyn just didn't want me around because I reminded him that his success, his new home, his comfortable life, was less the result of his own efforts than of the generosity of an old man he could barely tolerate. The phone rang, interrupting my gloomy musings. It was Enid. "Grandpa, I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "Sure, baby. I'm watching a documentary on World War II. It's very informative." "You're not sitting there alone and angry?" "I'm too old to waste energy on anger," I said. And it was true. I wasn't angry. I was disappointed, hurt, but not angry. "Dinner was awful," Enid said suddenly. Dad went on and on about his promotion, about what an indispensable employee he was, how much he was appreciated by his superiors. Mom pretended to be delighted even though I could see she was bored. And I thought about you all the time. "You didn't have to, baby. I had a great time tonight. I told them I'm coming to see you tomorrow." Mom made a face like I'd betrayed the family. I sighed. "Don't get yourself in trouble because of me, Enid. It's not because of you, Grandpa. It's because of them, because of the way they've become." After talking to Enid, I turned off the TV and went upstairs to the bedroom. On the bedside table was a picture of Margaret, her last picture taken a month before her diagnosis. She was smiling into the camera, and there was the same sincerity in her eyes that I'd seen in Enid's. "What would you do in my shoes, Maggie?" I asked the picture. Of course she didn't answer, but I knew Margaret well enough to imagine her reaction. She wouldn't have let Loralee and Mervyn treat her like that. She would have told them everything she thought right to their faces, without caring about the consequences. Margaret had always been stronger than me in that respect. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. My mind was spinning with thoughts of family, of money, of how easy it was to break the bonds that seemed to be the strongest. Maybe I'd been clinging to an illusion all these years. Maybe Loralee had never really been attracted to me, but simply tolerated me for financial support. And in turn, I'd used the money as a way to keep her close, to replace with it what I couldn't give emotionally. It was ironic that I, a man who had prided himself all his life on being practical and sensible, was so blind when it came to my own family. Something had to change. I couldn't continue to live my life as if everything was okay, as if being used and rejected by my own daughter was normal. I deserved more respect, and maybe it was time to remind them of that. With that thought, I finally fell asleep. In the morning, I woke up with unexpected clarity in my head. I knew what I had to do, and it wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about self-respect and finally stopping letting others take advantage of me. I made breakfast, drank my coffee, and sat down at the computer. I needed to check some financials before making a final decision. Enid arrived around 11 in the morning with a bottle of wine and a bag of fruit. I had already made the lasagna dough and was now chopping vegetables for the sauce. Cooking always calmed me down. In a world where much is beyond my control, the kitchen remained the territory where I made the rules. "How was your night?" Enid asked, kissing my cheek. "The usual. Woke up at 5, read the paper, had coffee." Enid looked at me carefully. "You look determined." I grinned. She was always observant. "Just having a good day," I answered evasively. "Help me with the sauce." We cooked together, chatting about all sorts of little things, about a new movie Enid wanted to see, a strange neighbor who'd installed a unicorn statue in his yard, a book I'd recently read. The usual grandfather-granddaughter conversation, with no mention of last night's dinner or the relationship with Loralee and Mervyn. But I could see that Enid was worried. She cast studying glances at me now and then, as if trying to figure out what was going on in my head. When the lasagna was in the oven and we had moved into the living room with glasses of lemonade, the wine was left for tonight, Enid finally made up her mind. "Grandpa, I've been thinking about yesterday, about the way Mom and Dad treated you." I nodded, giving her a chance to continue. It was wrong and unfair, especially after everything you did for them. Life is rarely fair, baby. But that doesn't mean you should just accept it, she exclaimed with sudden fervor. You deserve better. I looked at my granddaughter, so young, so passionate in her defense of justice. At her age, I too believed that the world could be changed if you wanted it bad enough. You know, I said, deciding she deserved to know the truth. I've made my decision. This morning, Enid tensed. What decision? I'm cutting off financial support for your parents. All payments on their house, insurance, utilities, everything. She looked at me with wide-open eyes. You? Are you serious? Absolutely. I've already started the process of canceling the auto payments. I'll finish the rest tomorrow. Enid leaned back in her chair, considering my words. They're going to be furious, she said at last. No doubt. They may never forgive you. I shrugged. Is there anything to forgive? Don't I have the right to use my money as I see fit? Enid bit her lip. Of course you do. It's just, they're used to relying on your help. That's the problem, I said, feeling the long, restrained irritation rising in me. They take my help for granted, as if I were obligated to pay for their comfortable lives, but I wasn't even allowed to attend the family dinner. Enid didn't argue. She knew I was right. Instead, she asked, what should I do when they start asking me about you? Tell the truth, or say nothing. It's your decision. I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. She nodded and we moved on to other topics, but I could see that my decision bothered her, even though she understood its fairness. After lunch, Enid left. She had a meeting with friends planned. Left alone, I sat down at my computer and opened my bank account. It was time to take action. First, I canceled my mortgage auto payments, $2,300 monthly. Then the home insurance, $350. Loralee and Mervin's car insurance, another $280. One by one, I canceled the payments that had been deducted from my account for years, providing a comfortable life for my daughter and son-in-law. Utilities, country club memberships, cable subscriptions, even the monthly fee for the gardener, all of these were now becoming their own concern. The total came to 135 different payments that I canceled in one evening. With each canceled payment, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Bitterness at the realization that it had come to this, relief at the decision, and, surprisingly, some satisfaction. It was as if I was finally lifting a heavy weight off my shoulders that I had been carrying for too long. Finished with my banking, I sent a short email to my attorney, informing him of my decision to end my financial support of my daughter and son-in-law. I wasn't going to change my will. Loralee would still get her share of the inheritance when I died, but until then, she would have to learn to live on her own resources. In the evening, I sat on the back porch, sipping bourbon and watching the sun go down. For the first time in a long time, I felt free, like I'd made a decision that was long overdue, but that I'd been putting off for fear of losing my last connection with my daughter. The phone rang around 8 p.m. Lorelai's number. I watched the screen light up and go out, but I didn't answer it. Not at the moment. I wasn't ready for this conversation yet. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, it was Mervin. I grinned. They must have already received notices from the bank canceling the auto payments. Nothing speeds up communication like money matters. I muted the sound on my phone and went back to my bourbon. Let them suffer for a while, wondering what was going on. Let them feel some of the anxiety and uncertainty I'd felt when I'd gotten that cold email from Lorelai. Sunday morning began with a persistent knock on the door. I was just brewing coffee when I heard it, a sharp, demanding knock, as if the person on the doorstep had every right to demand my attention. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Loralee stood on the threshold, her face contorted with anger. Behind her, by the car, Mervin's figure loomed. He didn't dare come any closer, but he didn't stay home either. "What have you done?" Lorelei blurted out instead of greeting me. I looked at her calmly. "Good morning, Lorelei. Don't you want to come in?" She squeezed past me into the hallway without taking off her shoes. Mervyn followed reluctantly, keeping his distance. "We got notices from the bank," Lorelei continued as I closed the door. "All auto payments have been canceled. All of them. Do you have any idea what that means?" "I do," I replied, heading for the kitchen. "Coffee?" "What the hell is coffee?" she exclaimed, following me. "We're talking about serious things. About our house. About our bills." "Your bills," I corrected, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Not mine." Lorelei stared at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. "What happened to you? Why did you suddenly decide to cancel everything?" I took a sip of coffee, gathering my thoughts. Mervyn stood in the kitchen doorway, his face a mixture of anger and concern. "I've decided to withdraw my financial support," I said finally. "Mervyn has been promoted. You're both working. You have a steady income. You're perfectly capable of paying your own expenses. But this, it was an agreement," Lorelei exclaimed. "You promised to help us with the house." "I don't remember making that promise," I replied. "I helped you with the down payment and paid the bills for a while, but I never said I'd do it forever." Mervyn finally spoke up. "Is this about dinner? Is it because we didn't invite you?" I looked at him the first time I'd really looked at him in a long time. A thin man with balding hair and a permanently tense expression. The man who'd married my daughter 30 years ago and whom I'd never been able to love like a son. "No, Mervyn," I said calmly. "Not because of dinner. Because of everything. Because of the way you've treated me these past years. As an ATM machine, not as a person. As a person outside of your immediate family." Lorelei went pale. She recognized her own words from the letter. "Dad, I didn't mean—" "That's exactly what you meant," I interrupted her. "And you know what? You're right. I'm really out of your family. I was stupid enough to think that my financial support made me part of it. But now, I realize my mistake." Mervyn stepped forward, his face reddening. "You can't just cancel all the payments. We have obligations, deadlines, mortgages, insurance." "Your obligations," I said firmly, "not mine. I didn't sign your mortgage agreement. I didn't commit to your insurance. These are all your decisions, your responsibility." "But you promised," Lorelei exclaimed, and I could hear the panic in her voice. "You said you'd help us with the house." "And I did," I replied. $175,000 for the down payment, plus all the payments for the last 6 months. Consider it my gift. But there will be no more gifts." Lorelei looked at me as if I'd hit her. Then her expression changed from panic to anger. "You're doing this out of spite," she said, lowering her voice, "because we don't let you control our lives." I shook my head. "I never tried to control you. I just wanted to be a part of your life. But you've made it clear that you don't need me, only my money." "That's not fair," Lorelei exclaimed. "We always invited you to holidays, birthdays." "Out of a sense of duty," I finished for her. "Not because they wanted to see me, but because they felt it was their duty, a duty I was paying for." Mervyn stepped forward, his voice threatening. "You can't do this to us. We're your family, damn it." "No, Mervyn," I replied calmly. "You said yourself that I'm outside your family, and you know what? I've finally accepted it. You're free to live your life without me, and I'm free to use my money as I see fit." Lorelei burst into tears, loud, tearful tears like when she was a child and didn't get what she wanted. Those tears used to break my heart, to make me give in, to compromise, but not today. "Daddy," she sobbed, "please, we can't pay for the house ourselves. We'll have to sell it." "Maybe," I agreed. "Or find a cheaper house. Or Mervyn could ask for a pay raise to go with his promotion. You have options." "You're a cruel man," Mervyn hissed. "Always had been. Cold, calculating." I looked at him calmly. "And you, Mervyn, have always been a man who lives at other people's expense. First at your parents' expense, then Lorelai's, then mine. Maybe it's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet. He jerked as if I'd hit him, and for a moment I thought he might lunge at me. But instead, he turned around and walked out of the kitchen. A few seconds later, the front door slammed. Loralee looked at me through her tears. "How can you do this to me? I'm your daughter, and I'm your father," I replied. "But that didn't stop you from writing that I'm outside your family." She lowered her gaze. "It was just a phrase. I didn't think—" "That's just it, Loralee. You weren't thinking. Not about my feelings, not about the fact that I could be anything more than a source of money." She wiped away her tears and her face took on a hard expression. "Okay, if that's how you want to play it, so be it. But don't expect us to come to your funeral. The blow was brutal, but I didn't show how much it hurt me." "That's your right," I said in an even voice. "Just like it's my right to decide what to spend my money on." Lorelai turned and walked out, slamming the door even harder than Mervyn had. I stayed in the kitchen, finishing my coffee, which was already getting cold. The phone rang an hour later. It was Enid. "Grandpa, are you okay? Mom and Dad just got home. They're furious." "I'm fine, baby. Are you?" Shocked, to be honest. I've never seen my parents like this before. Mommy crying, Daddy screaming betrayal and ingratitude. "What happened?" I sighed. "They came to see me." I explained my decision. "And they accepted it?" "Not exactly," I grinned. "They reacted more like children whose favorite toy had been taken away." Enid was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "Mom says you're doing this out of revenge, because you weren't invited to dinner. What do you think?" I think you have every right to control your money, and that your parents are too used to relying on you." I smiled. My clever girl. "Thank you, Enid. But I don't want you fighting with your parents over me." "They've already accused me of knowing about your plans and not warning them," she said bitterly. "Even though I only found out yesterday when it was too late to change anything. I'm sorry you have to be caught between two fires. Don't apologize. I'm an adult. I can handle it. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." After talking to Enid, I went out into the garden. It was a clear, warm day, and the apple trees in the far corner of the property were starting to turn red with ripening fruit. I decided I would make cider this year, not for Margaret, but for myself, and maybe for Enid. The phone rang several more times throughout the day. Loralee, then Mervyn, then Loralee again. I didn't answer it. What else was there to say? Everything had already been said this morning. In the evening came a message from Mervyn, a long one, full of threats and accusations. He wrote that he would contact a lawyer, that I had broken the verbal agreement, that they would sue me for financial fraud. I only grinned as I read it. Mervyn knew enough about finances to know that no court would make me pay their bills. There was no written commitment, no contract, just my goodwill, which had dried up. Another message came from Loralee, more emotional, with an attempt to press pity. She wrote about how hard it was going to be for them, how they were counting on my help, how it might affect their reputation in the new neighborhood if they had to sell the house. I didn't respond to any of these messages. Instead, I sat on the back porch with a glass of bourbon and felt truly free for the first time in a long time. Free from the obligations I had placed upon myself. Free from the illusion that I could buy my daughter's love. It was a bitter freedom, but freedom nonetheless. The calls and messages continued on Monday. The tone became threatening or pleading, but the essence remained the same. Return the money, keep paying, don't ruin our lives. I went about my business, ignoring this torrent. Went to the store, went to the bank to discuss some investments, had lunch with Horace Jenkins in a little cafe near the house. "You look different," Horace said as we waited to order. "Calmer." "I've made a big decision," I answered evasively. Horace nodded understandingly. He wasn't the type to ask questions. In the evening, Enid arrived. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, a tense shoulder line. "My parents have been calling me all day," she said, dropping into a chair. "They wanted me to talk to you, to convince you to change your mind." "And what did you say?" "That it was none of my business. That you're adults and you'll figure it out on your own." I nodded. "That's right. Don't let them drag you into this." Enid sighed. "They're panicked, Grandpa. Really panicked. They've got huge mortgages, loans, which they took out with my money," I finished for her, "without asking me, without discussing it with me, just taking it for granted that I would be paying for their lifestyle forever." Enid didn't argue. She knew I was right. "What's going to happen now?" she asked after a pause. "They'll adjust," I replied. "They might have to sell the house, find something more modest. Or Mervyn will have to actually work for the promotion he got, not just brag about it. Or Loralee would have to reconsider her spending on designer clothes and spa treatments." Enid smiled weakly. "Sounds reasonable. But they're in no state to think rationally right now. They're adults, baby. They can handle it." We sat in silence, each of us immersed in our own thoughts. Then Enid said quietly, "You know, I always wondered why you let them use you for so long, why you didn't just say no sooner." I looked at her, my smart, perceptive granddaughter who saw what I myself had long been unwilling to admit. "Because it was easier for me to give money than the things that really mattered," I answered honestly. "Love, time, attention. I've always been stingy with emotion, but generous with financial support. And somewhere along the way, I had come to believe myself that one could replace the other." Enid came over and hugged me, tightly, sincerely, as no one had hugged me in a long time. "You deserve the best, grandfather," she whispered, "and I'm proud of you for finally standing up for yourself." When she left, I sat in silence for a long time, thinking about her words. Had I really stood up for myself? Or was I just getting back at my daughter and son-in-law for years of neglect? Was my revenge fair, or had I stooped to their level? I didn't know the answers to these questions. All I knew was that for the first time in a long time I felt real. Not an ATM, not a convenient sponsor, but a human being with his own desires and boundaries that others should respect. Tuesday brought a new wave of calls and messages. Loralee sent a long letter of apology, so fake it was embarrassing to even read. She wrote about how sorry she was for her words, how she appreciated me not only for my financial support, but for my wisdom, my experience, and for being her father. Words that might have moved me a week ago now seemed hollow. If she really felt that way, she wouldn't have written that cold letter declining the dinner invitation. Mervyn, on the other hand, went from threats to attempts at rational persuasion. He sent a detailed financial plan showing how my money helped them now, but would be less needed in the future when his career went up after his promotion. He even offered to pay me interest, turning my help into an investment of sorts. I deleted his letter before I even finished reading it. It was all an attempt at manipulation, just with different methods. Loralee was pushing emotion. Mervyn was appealing to rationality. But the goal was the same, to get access to my wallet back. By Wednesday, the calls became less frequent and the messages shorter and angrier. They were apparently beginning to realize that I wasn't going to change my mind. Loralee sent a text accusing me of never truly loving her, of always prioritizing money over family. The irony of that accusation didn't escape me. Mervyn, for his part, hinted that I might regret my decision when I needed help in my old age. "Think about the future, Bradford. Who will be there for you when you can't take care of yourself?" That threat might have scared me before. Now, however, I only grinned. If their concern for me depended on my financial support, it wasn't concern at all, but a simple transaction, and I preferred to be alone than to be with people for whom my value was measured by the amount of money in my bank account. It had been 2 weeks since I'd canceled all payments. 2 weeks of relative calm, except for the occasional calls from Loralee and Mervyn, which I still ignored. A new rhythm had settled into my life. I got up early, ate breakfast, read the paper, occasionally met with Horace or other acquaintances, and worked in the garden. A simple, quiet life without drama or manipulation. Enid stopped by a few times, but not for long. She was busy at work and, as I understood it, trying not to get too deeply involved in our conflict with her parents. She told me that the atmosphere at home had become even more tense. Loralee and Mervyn were constantly fighting, blaming each other for the situation. "Daddy says Mommy should have treated you better so you wouldn't stop making payments," Enid recounted. "And Mom blames him for insisting on buying such an expensive house, knowing they couldn't afford it without your help." I listened without commenting. Let them sort it out for themselves. Maybe this will make them finally take responsibility for their decisions. On Wednesday, 17 days after the payments were canceled, the doorbell rang. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had just finished pruning the roses in the garden. Opening the door, I saw Loralee, alone without Mervyn. She looked different from the last time I'd seen her. Not furious, but rather haggard. Dark circles under her eyes, pale face, her hair in a sloppy ponytail, not the flawless look she usually maintained. "May I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside, letting her into the house. We walked into the kitchen, the same place where our last conversation had taken place. She sat down at the table. I remained standing, leaning against the countertop. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, more out of politeness than a desire for a treat. She shook her head. "No, thanks. I came to talk about the situation." I waited for her to continue without helping her start the conversation. "Dad, we're in serious financial trouble," she finally said. "The bank sent us a mortgage delinquency notice. Another month and they could start foreclosure proceedings." I nodded, but didn't respond. It was expected. "We've been trying to rearrange the budget," she continued. "Mervyn asked for a pay raise along with a promotion, but was told it wouldn't be considered until 6 months later. I've taken on extra projects at work, but it's not enough." She looked at me pleadingly. "Daddy, please. We're not asking you to pay for everything like before. Maybe just the mortgage until we get back on our feet." I crossed my arms over my chest. "What's stopping you from selling the house and buying one you can afford?" Loralee sighed. "We've thought about it, but the market is not favorable right now and we could lose a lot of our down payment." "My down payment," I corrected. She grimaced. "Yes, your down payment. But you're the one who offered to help us with the house. You said you wanted us to live in a nice neighborhood, somewhere safe." "I wanted you to be happy," I said, "and I thought that my contribution to your happiness would be appreciated, that it would make me part of the family, not a person outside your immediate family." Loralee lowered her eyes. I already apologized for that phrase. I didn't think about how it would sound. "It's not about the words, Loralee. It's about attitude. You and Mervyn took my help for granted for years, but when it came to a simple dinner, you decided I wasn't good enough to sit at the same table with you." "That was not so," she objected. "Mervyn was just nervous. This was an important event for him." "So important that the man paying for the roof over his head couldn't be present?" I interrupted. Loralee didn't answer, and in her silence I saw a confirmation of my words. "You know," I continued, "all these years I've given you money, thinking that it's a way to remain a part of your life, that it would make up for my absence when you were a child, my emotional restraint. But I was wrong. Money doesn't buy love or respect. It only creates the illusion of a relationship." Loralee looked up. There was something new in her eyes. Not pleading or anger, but some kind of understanding. "You're right," she said quietly. "We took your help for granted. And that was wrong." I was surprised by that admission, but I wasn't quick to rejoice. Too often in the past, Lorelei had said what I wanted to hear in order to get what I wanted. "But now we're really in trouble," she continued. "And I'm asking you to help us, not because I think it's your responsibility, but because you're my father, and I hope you still care about us." I looked at my daughter, no longer a young woman, a mother of a grown daughter, a professional with a good career. And yet she sat in front of me like a child waiting for Daddy to solve all problems. "Loralee, I said at last. You're 53 years old. Mervyn is 56. You both work. You have a steady income. If you can't afford this house without my help, then you shouldn't have bought it. It's not my responsibility to support a lifestyle you can't provide for yourself. Her face changed from pleading to annoyance. Is that how you see it? As a lesson in financial responsibility? I look at it as reality, I replied. You're adults who made a choice and now have to live with the consequences. What about your choices? She suddenly blurted out. You chose to work 6 days a week when I was a kid. You chose to miss my school recitals, my birthdays, my big moments. You chose to be an absent father, and now you resent me for not including you in every aspect of my life? Her words hurt because there was some truth in them. I did work too hard when she was little, but that wasn't the whole truth. I worked to provide for you and your mother, I said calmly, to make sure you had everything you needed, food, clothing, education. I was doing what I felt was my duty as a father and husband. And emotional support and presence? Isn't that a father's responsibility too? I sighed. You're right. I wasn't the perfect father. I was too focused on material provision and not enough on emotional connection. And I regret that. But that doesn't excuse the way you and Mervyn have treated me these past years. Lauralee stood up, her face flushed with anger. So this is revenge? For not being the perfect daughter? For not calling often enough? For not inviting you to every dinner? No, I shook my head. This isn't revenge. It's just a decision to stop pursuing relationships that hurt me, to stop being used by people who only see me as a source of money. It's not fair, she exclaimed. We didn't see you only as a source of money. You're my father, Enid's grandfather. Who wasn't invited to the family dinner, I finished for her. Who's called the man outside the family, the one you only call when you need money or help with the house. Lauralee fell silent, looking at me with a mixture of anger and confusion. Then her shoulders slumped and she said quietly, Okay, I understand your position. We'll sell the house, find something smaller, cheaper. I nodded, feeling neither joy nor satisfaction at her surrender. It's a reasonable decision, but I want you to know, she continued, and there was a note of steel in her voice, that this is going to change our relationship, forever. You chose money over family, and I won't forget that. I shook my head. No, Lauralee, I chose self-respect over exploitation, and if that means the end of our relationship, then it was never real. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. A few seconds later, the front door slammed. I was left standing there feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness that my only daughter couldn't or wouldn't understand my feelings, and relief that I had finally expressed everything I had accumulated over the years. In the evening, Enid called. Mom came back from your place very upset. What happened? I sighed. She came to ask for money for the mortgage. I said no. That's what I thought, Enid said. She and Dad are now discussing selling the house. The atmosphere is tense, to say the least. I'm sorry you have to be in the middle of it, I said sincerely. Don't worry about me. I'm already thinking about getting my own apartment. At 25, it's time to start living on my own. The thought made me happy and sad at the same time. Happy because Enid deserved to be free and independent. Sad because moving out would mean I'd see her less often. Just don't rush into a decision because of this situation, I advised. Give your parents time to adjust to the new circumstances. It's not just that, she said. I've been thinking about moving for a long time. It's just that now, when they're fighting all the time and trying to drag me into their squabbles, the thought of having my own space is especially appealing. I understood her feelings. Margaret and I never argued in front of Lauralee, even when we seriously disagreed with each other. We believed that children should be protected from adult conflict. Apparently, Lauralee and Mervyn didn't share that principle. Anyway, Enid continued, I was wondering, maybe you could talk to Mom again. Maybe find some kind of compromise. I'm not asking you to pay all their bills again, but maybe some temporary help until they sell the house. I appreciated her attempts to make peace, but I knew that compromise in this situation would only delay the inevitable. Enid, I understand that you want to help, but your parents need to learn to live within their means. Any help from me now will only maintain their illusion that they can continue to live as they used to, at my expense. She sighed. I understand. It's hard, seeing a family fall apart. A family doesn't fall apart, baby, I said softly. It's just changing, maybe for the better. Sometimes you have to go through hardships to find a healthier way of being. After talking to Enid, I sat on the back porch for a long time, watching the sun set over the horizon. Laurelie's words about me choosing money over family echoed in my head. Was that really how she saw the situation? Or was it just another attempt at manipulation to make me feel guilty? Perhaps the truth was somewhere in the middle. I wasn't the perfect father when she was growing up. I did work too hard, too little present emotionally. But she wasn't the perfect daughter either, especially in her later years. We both made mistakes. We were both responsible for the state of our relationship. But one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to go back to the old model where my value to them was measured by the amounts on bank checks. If our relationship couldn't exist without my financial support, then it wasn't worth preserving at all. The next few days passed in silence. Neither Laurelie nor Mervyn called or wrote. Enid stopped by once, but not for long. She was busy at work, and I understood, trying to stay out of the domestic drama. Sunday night, as I was getting ready for bed, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I saw Mervyn, alone, without Laurelie. He looked tired but determined. "Can I come in?" he asked. "We need to talk." I let him in and we went into the living room. He sat in the chair and I sat on the couch across from him. "Laurelie doesn't know I'm here," he began, "and she'd probably be furious if she did. But I figured I should try again." I waited for him to continue without helping him. "Bradford, I realize you're hurt, and you probably have a right to be. I haven't always treated you with the respect you deserve, and I'm sorry for that." His words sounded sincere, but I knew Mervyn too well to trust his sudden remorse. "What are you getting at, Mervyn?" He sighed. "Straight to the point, as always. Okay, Laurelie and I have decided to sell the house. Already contacted a realtor, started the process. But there's a problem. It's a bad time to sell, and we could get a lot less than we paid. That means not only will we lose your down payment, but we'll owe the bank." I nodded, expecting a request for money. It didn't take long. "I was thinking," Mervyn continued, "maybe you could help us cover the difference. Not as regular payments, but as a lump sum so we can start with a clean slate. No debts, no obligations to the bank." I looked at him, this man who had been married to my daughter for 30 years, but had remained a stranger to me. A man who saw me not as a father-in-law, but as an ATM machine. A man who decided I wasn't worthy of sitting at the same table with him on the day of his professional triumph. "No," I said simply. Mervyn blinked. "I'm sorry?" I said, "No, I won't give you any more money. No regular payments, no lump sums." His face tensed. "Bradford, I'm trying to be reasonable here. I admit that Laurelie and I have made mistakes, that we didn't always appreciate your help the way we should have. But this is a serious situation. We could be left with a huge debt, which you created on your own," I finished for him. "Buying a house you couldn't afford, counting on my money without my consent." "We thought we had your consent," he exclaimed. "You yourself offered to help with the down payment. You yourself started paying the bills." "And I kept all my promises," I said. "I paid the down payment. I paid the bills for 6 months. But I never promised to do it forever, and I certainly didn't promise to cover the losses from your rash decision." Mervyn looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "So this is final? You're just abandoning us to our fate?" "I'm not abandoning you, Mervyn. I'm just stopping supporting your financial irresponsibility. You're both adults with good jobs. You can handle it." He stood up, his face flushed with anger. "You know, Lauralee was right about you. You've always been a cold, calculating man. Even when you gave money, it wasn't out of love or generosity, but out of a desire to control, to feel powerful." I looked at him calmly, not giving in to the provocation. "If that's what you think, why did you come to ask me for help in the first place?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard that the glass in the windows rattled. I remained sitting in the living room feeling strangely calm. Mervyn had tried to hurt me, accusing me of being cold and wanting to control. But the truth was that he and Lauralee were the ones who had always tried to manipulate me, either through guilt or family duty, or threats to end the relationship. And now that all those methods weren't working, they'd resorted to direct accusations, hoping I'd flinch, feel guilty, and open my wallet again. But I wasn't going to do that. Not out of revenge or cruelty, but out of a realization that it would be unhealthy for all of us, for me to continue to be used, for them to continue to live under the illusion that you could rely on other people's money indefinitely. The next day, Enid called, her voice sounding worried. "Grandpa, are you all right? Dad came back yesterday very angry. He told Mom that you refused to help with the sale of the house and that you were enjoying their misery." I sighed. "I'm fine, baby. And I'm not enjoying anyone's misery. I just refuse to give them any more money." "That's what I thought," she said. "But they're in a very bad way. Dad's talking about bankruptcy, Mom's crying and blaming everyone around her. It's like a nightmare." I felt a prick of guilt, not for my decision, which I thought was the right one, but for Enid having to witness all this. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said. "Maybe you should move away for a while. Do you have any friends you could stay with?" "I'm already thinking about it," she replied. "My colleague Emily has offered to let me stay with her until I find my own apartment." "That's a good idea. You need time and space to focus on your life, not on your parents' problems." Enid was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "Grandpa, I know you're right about this situation, that the parents created their own problems and should solve them themselves, but it still hurts me to see the family fall apart." "I understand, baby. It hurts me too. But sometimes you have to go through pain to find a healthier path." After talking to Enid, I sat in my favorite chair for a long time, reflecting on the situation. Perhaps I had been too harsh with Mervyn yesterday. Perhaps I should have offered some compromise, some limited help. But then I remembered all the years of neglect, all the times they'd used me, all the times I'd felt needed just because of my wallet. And I realized I had done the right thing. I couldn't continue to maintain this unhealthy dynamic. I couldn't keep being their financial safety net, allowing them to live beyond their means. I couldn't keep giving money to people who didn't respect me enough to invite me over for family dinner. It was a painful truth, but a truth nonetheless. And sometimes you have to accept the pain in order to move on. A few days later, Enid announced that she was moving in with a friend. Lauralee and Mervyn had officially put the house on the market and were looking for something more affordable. Their relationship was strained and they were constantly fighting, blaming each other for their financial problems. "Mom still says you're doing this out of revenge," Enid recounted. "And Dad blames her for not being a considerate enough daughter. It's like a vicious cycle of accusations and no one wants to take responsibility." I wasn't surprised. Lauralee and Mervyn have always been masters in the art of shifting blame. But this time, I wasn't going to be their scapegoat or their savior. I chose a different path, the path of self-respect and healthy boundaries. And even though it was hard, even though it hurt us all, I knew it was the right decision in the long run. Maybe one day Lauralee and Mervyn will realize that. Maybe they'll learn to live within their means, to take responsibility for their decisions, to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. And if they don't, well, I did the best I could. I gave them a home, an education, support. I've been there for them when they needed me, not always emotionally, I admit, but always financially. And now it's time for them to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. It's been a month since Lauralee and Mervyn put the house on the market. A month with no calls, no requests for help, no accusations. Complete silence, broken only by occasional visits and calls from Enid, who kept me in the loop. It was a surprisingly warm October morning. I was sitting on the back porch with a cup of coffee, watching 2 thrushes arguing over the last berries on a bush. The phone vibrated, a message from Enid. "Grandpa, they finally sold the house. Much cheaper than they wanted. Moving this weekend to an apartment in Brookhaven." I sipped my coffee, feeling strangely indifferent to this news. Not long ago, I would have felt a prick of guilt or anxiety. Now, nothing. It was like we were talking about strangers. "Aren't you being a little hard on them?" Horace Jenkins asked me yesterday when we were playing chess in the park. A daughter, after all, the only one. Cruel? I moved my queen to checkmate him. Or fair? Where is the line where self-respect becomes cruelty? Horace scratched his chin thoughtfully. "You may be right. I'm just afraid you'll be alone." "I am not alone," I replied, smiling. "I have Enid, and I think I've made some new friends. Yes, new friends. Who would have thought that at 78 you could start a new chapter of life?" It all started with an announcement in the local library. "The Classical Literature Lovers Circle invites new members," read a modest leaf on the bulletin board. I signed up, not particularly expecting anything interesting, just to occupy my time. The first meeting exceeded all expectations. 8 people, all around my age, gathered to discuss Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities by Dickens. The conversation quickly turned from literary analysis to a philosophical discussion about sacrifice, loyalty, and the choice between duty and personal happiness. "What do you think, Mr. Ennis?" asked the circle leader, Eleanor Greenwood, a 75-year-old widow with lively brown eyes and a quiet but confident voice. "Would you agree with Carton's choice?" I wondered. "I think each of us has sacrificed something for others at least once in our lives. The question is how many times we can sacrifice before we lose ourselves." My answer sparked a lively discussion. After the meeting, Eleanor approached me. "Interesting thought, Mr. Ennis. Many people think of self-sacrifice as an unconditional virtue, but rarely think about its limits." "Please call me Bradford," I said. "Mr. Ennis sounds too formal for a man of my age." "Then you can call me Eleanor," she smiled. "Would you like to have a cup of tea in the cafe across the street? I think our conversation has just begun." So began our weekly meetings, first in the circle, then in the cafe, then for walks in the park. Eleanor turned out to be an amazing woman, a former English teacher who traveled half the world after retirement, a keen collector of rare editions of Dickens. "My daughter thinks I'm crazy," she laughed as she showed me her collection. "Spending money on old books when you could buy a new TV set." "And what do you say to her?" I asked. "That the TV will be obsolete in 5 years and these books will outlive us all." She gently ran her hand over the spine of the first edition of Oliver Twist. I'd long since given up trying to convince her of anything, though. Grown children have a right to make their own mistakes. That phrase made me wonder, did I really give Lauralee the right to make mistakes? Or was I always trying to control, guide, correct first with parenting, then with money? In mid-October, Enid invited me to dinner at her new apartment, small but bright and cozy, overlooking the park. "Are you settling in?" I asked, helping her set the plates down. "Slowly," she nodded. "I feel grown up and independent at last." "At 25 it's time," I grinned. "Some people don't become independent at 50, she said, and we both knew who we were talking about. At dinner, Enid told me that Lauralee and Mervyn had already moved into a new apartment, a 2-bedroom, in an old building with no elevator overlooking the parking lot. "Mom's terrified of the neighborhood," Enid said. She says the neighbors are too loud and the entryway smells like cats. What about Mervyn? I asked. Strangely, he seems to be adjusting more easily. He says he's wanted to live closer to work for a long time, and also, she hesitated. What? He got a second job. He's doing some financial consulting for a construction firm. Weekends. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Mervyn, who'd always thought weekend work was sacrilege, was now taking on extra projects. They'll pull through, I said, and it wasn't a consolation but a statement of fact. They're both working. They have a steady income. They just have to learn to live within their means. You know, Enid said thoughtfully, I never thought I'd say this, but maybe your decision will be good for them. They're really working together as a team for the first time in years. Mom's even started cooking, can you believe it? I grinned, remembering how Lauralee always ordered takeout, thinking the kitchen was a waste of time. People adapt, I said, especially when there's no choice. After dinner, we drank tea on the small balcony. It was a warm fall evening and the streetlights were burning in the park across the street, casting yellow light on the yellowing leaves. I met Noah, Enid said suddenly. He works in the same office as me, but in a different department. What do you think of him? I asked, noting the blush on her cheeks. He's special, smart, kind, with a sense of humor. And he likes old movies, you know? We saw Casablanca last weekend. Sounds promising, I smiled. I'd like to meet him. You will? Enid nodded. Maybe next weekend. We could have dinner together. She paused. Maybe you could invite your Eleanor. Now it was my turn to blush. My Eleanor? What makes you think she's mine? Grandfather, you mentioned her name 5 times this evening, Enid laughed. And each time your face changed. Am I really that predictable? For those who love you, yes, she took my hand. I'm happy for you. I really am. As I walked back home, I thought about the upcoming dinner. What would Eleanor say? Would it be too soon to introduce her to Enid? But somehow, the thought of the 2 people closest to me meeting only gave me a warm sense of anticipation. At home, the red light on the answering machine was blinking. One message from Eleanor. Bradford, you left your book at my place. Can you come over tomorrow? I'll bake an apple pie. I smiled. Maybe I'm not as bad at building relationships as I'd always thought. The next morning, I picked apples from my orchard for Eleanor, who wanted to try her grandmother's cider recipe. This year's crop was excellent, and the apples were large and juicy. I heard the sound of a car pulling up and turned around to see Lorelai's car. My heart clenched, but not with joy or excitement, but with wariness. Why had she come? Was she asking for money again? Lauralee got out of the car alone. She was wearing a simple dress instead of the usual designer outfits. Her hair gathered into a simple ponytail. She looked ordinary, like a middle-aged woman living an ordinary life. Daddy, she said, stopping a few steps away from me. Lauralee, I nodded, not knowing how to start the conversation. Enid said you had a good crop of apples this year. I looked at the basket of apples, then back at my daughter. Yes, not bad. I was wondering, maybe you could share a few? I want to bake a pie for Mervyn. He's been working so hard lately. This request was so unexpected, so unlike Lauralee, that I was speechless for a moment. Sure, I said finally, pointing to the basket. Take as many as you need. She stepped closer, picking out apples. I noticed that her hands, always so well-groomed with impeccable manicure, now looked different. The skin was a little coarse, the nails shorter. How's your new apartment? I asked, just to break the silence. Small, she answered with a wry smile, and noisy, but we get by. I nodded, not knowing what else to say. Enid says you've made a friend, Lauralee said suddenly. Eleanor, right? Yes, I felt my shoulders tense. We met at the library. That's good. I'm happy for you. We stood in awkward silence, Two people bound by blood but separated by years of misunderstandings and resentment. "Dad," Loralee finally said, looking somewhere past me, "I'm not going to apologize for what Mervyn and I did, for the way we've treated you all these years. Not because I'm not sorry, I am, really, but because no apology will make up for the past." I remained silent, letting her speak. "But I want you to know," she continued, "that I understand why you did what you did, and I don't hold a grudge against you." I looked at my daughter, not perfect, not the way I'd always wanted her to be, but real, flesh and blood, with all her flaws and weaknesses. "I don't hold a grudge either, Loralee," I said finally. "We've both made mistakes. I worked too hard when you were little. I talked too little about my feelings, tried to replace emotional intimacy with material support." She nodded, and in her eyes I saw understanding, perhaps for the first time in years. "What now?" she asked quietly. I shrugged. "I don't know. We go on with our lives. You and Mervyn are learning to stand on your own 2 feet. Yeah, I'm finding new interests, new friends. Without me." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "Yes, without you," I agreed. "And maybe it's better for both of us. Sometimes you need distance to see things clearly." Lorelei picked up the basket of apples and headed for the car. At the door, she turned around. "I'm still your daughter, Daddy, no matter what happens." I nodded. "And I'm still your father, but that doesn't mean we have to be a part of each other's lives." She got into the car and drove away without another word. I was left standing in the middle of the orchard with a half-empty basket of apples and a strange feeling in my chest, not joy or sadness, but something in between, as if the load I had been carrying for so long had become a little lighter. Saturday night we gathered at my house, me, Eleanor, Enid, and her new friend Noah. I made lasagna from Margaret's recipe. Eleanor brought a salad and her famous apple pie, Enid and Noah a bottle of good wine. Noah turned out to be a pleasant young man, tall, lean, with attentive eyes behind the glasses. He worked as a cybersecurity specialist, knew 3 languages, and was fond of classical jazz. Watching him look at Enid, I felt a strange satisfaction. They reminded me of Margaret and me when we were young. The same looks, the same smiles, the same easy banter with each other. "Your granddaughter is a wonderful girl, Mr. Ennis," Noah said as we stepped out onto the porch while the women set the table. "The smartest and kindest person I know." "Yes," I agreed. "She's the best thing about our family." "She told me about the situation with her parents," Noah said carefully. "That must have been hard for you." I looked at him with a new respect. Most people would have avoided the subject. "It was hard," I admitted. "But sometimes you have to go through pain to find a better way." Noah nodded. "My family isn't perfect either. My father left us when I was 10. My mother raised me and my sister alone. I know what it's like when family relationships don't match the picture from the commercials." "And how did you cope?" I asked with genuine interest. "We accepted reality as it is," Noah shrugged. "We realized that family isn't always about blood ties. Sometimes it's the people you choose." His words echoed in me. Wasn't that what I was doing right now? Creating a new family of people I'd chosen myself. Eleanor, friends from the reading circle, Enid, who was more of a friend than just a granddaughter. The dinner was surprisingly easy and enjoyable. We talked about books, about music, about Eleanor's travels, about Enid and Noah's work. I told stories from my days as a building inspector. Eleanor shared memories of her students. No tension, no need to hide my thoughts or feelings, no awkward pauses or strained smiles. After dinner, when Enid and Noah left, Eleanor and I stayed on the back porch, sipping wine and looking up at the stars. "They're a beautiful couple," she said, "and your granddaughter is a wonderful girl. You should be proud of her." "I am," I replied. She inherited a lot from her grandmother. The same directness, the same sense of justice. And I suspect the same stubbornness from her grandfather, Eleanor smiled. Perhaps, I grinned, though I prefer to call it integrity. We laughed and the conversation moved on to other topics. But thoughts of Enid and her parents stayed with me. I thought about how strange life is, how we can be so close in blood and so far apart in spirit. How my granddaughter understood me better than my own daughter. How Loralee, despite my best efforts to provide for her financially, had never been able to see me as anything but a source of money. It was a bitter thought, but not as painful as it used to be. Time and distance had done its work, softening the sharp edges of memories, turning anger and resentment into philosophical acceptance. "What are you thinking about?" Eleanor asked, noticing my silence. "About family," I answered honestly. "About how we choose our paths, our connections. About how sometimes you have to let go of one relationship to build another." Eleanor took my hand. "You know, Bradford, I learned one important thing a long time ago. Sometimes the wisest choice is not to try to change people or situations, but to accept them as they are and move on." I squeezed her hand in return, feeling a calmness spill inside. Not happiness was too loud a word for what I was experiencing. More like peace, acceptance, a realization that life goes on despite all the losses and disappointments. In late October, Eleanor and I went to a classical music concert at the local Philharmonic. It was my first going out in years. I wore my best suit. Eleanor was in an elegant navy blue dress. After the concert, walking through the night park, she asked, "Do you ever miss Loralee? The times when you were closer?" I wondered. "Sometimes. But I don't miss the real Loralee. I miss the daughter I wanted to have. The idealized image that never existed." "I understand," Eleanor nodded. "My daughter lives in Seattle. We call once a month, see each other at Christmas. We have a polite but distant relationship. Sometimes I wish we were closer, but then I remind myself that you can't make someone else love you the way you want them to." "Exactly," I agreed. "You can offer your love, but you can't demand reciprocation. It's a lesson I learned too late." "But not too late to start living up to it," Eleanor smiled. We reached her house, a small but cozy cottage with a garden full of chrysanthemums. "Would you like to come in for a cup of tea?" she asked. "I'd love to." Inside it was warm and smelled of books. Her collection took up all the walls of the living room. While Eleanor made tea, I looked at the pictures on the mantelpiece. Young Eleanor and her husband, their daughter in her prom dress, their grandson on his bicycle. "Your family?" I asked when she returned with the tray. "Yes," she nodded. "George died 15 years ago. Lung cancer, smoked all his life. Daughter Olivia lives in Seattle, works as a lawyer. Grandson Ethan is in college." "Do you miss them?" "Every day," she set the tray on the table. "But I've learned to live my life without dwelling on what I don't have. I travel, I read, I take a class at the library, I visit them for the holidays. It's, enough." I knew what she meant. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't what we dreamed of, but enough. Enough to make life meaningful, to give me a reason to get out of bed every morning. Coming home late at night, I felt a lightness in my chest, as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Not because I'd forgiven Loralee and Mervyn, I wasn't sure I'd ever fully forgive them. And not because I had found in Eleanor a replacement for Margaret. No one would ever replace my wife. No. This lightness came from realizing that I had finally begun to live for myself, not as an ATM for ungrateful relatives, not as an eternally guilty father, not as a shadow of my past, but as a human being with my own desires, interests, boundaries, a man who deserves respect and has the right to demand it from others. At home, I sat on the back porch, in the same chair where I had once spent evenings with Margaret. The night sky was studded with stars, the air cool and fresh. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, and quiet music played in the house next door. I closed my eyes, breathing in the smell of fall, fallen leaves, smoke from fires, ripe apples, and for the first time in a long time I felt not only the bitterness of loss, but also a calm, confident acceptance of life as it is, with all its imperfections and unpredictable twists and turns, with all its losses and gains.